My 5-acre slice of heaven sat on the edge of Willow Creek, a shimmering ribbon of water that wound through wildflowers and ancient oaks. The creek was part of an easement, legally shared but fiercely loved by me and my lab, Pixel, who'd splash after minnows on lazy afternoons. The property was my sanctuary, beehives humming, sunflowers swaying, and a greenhouse half-built in the yard. The only thorn in this Eden was the HOA, a relic of the subdivision's early days, and its self-appointed enforcer, Karen Davis. Karen, with her platinum blonde bob and a clipboard perpetually tucked under her arm, was the neighborhood's unofficial dictator. She fined Mrs. Larson for unapproved rosebushes and sent cease and desist letters over kids' chalk drawings. Last winter, she knocked on my door, squinting at my holiday lights. Too bright, she'd snapped, citing an HOA rule I later confirmed didn't exist. I unplugged one strand and smiled, hoping to keep the peace. But Karen wasn't about peace, she was about control. It started small, as these things do. In June, I noticed wooden posts sprouting along our shared property line a few feet onto my side, hugging the creek. The next morning, a chain-link fence stood there, its metal glinting defiantly in the sun. It blocked my path to the creek, severed Pixel's favorite romping ground, and screamed Karen. The easement deed tucked in my filing cabinet clearly stated shared access. This wasn't just a fence, it was a land grab. I grabbed the deed, a surveyor's report from 2019, and a thermos of coffee for courage, then marched to Karen's McMansion. Her lawn was a sterile green, not a blade out of place, unlike my wildflower chaos. She answered the door in a pressed blazer as if she'd been waiting for battle. Karen, I said, keeping my voice steady, your fence is on my property, it's blocking the easement. Here, the deed and survey, it needs to come down. Karen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a smirk. That creek's HOA property, she said, jabbing a manicured nail at the air. You're trespassing just by standing there, I'm protecting my rights. I held up the surveyor's map, pointing to the boundary line. This says otherwise, let's sort this out before it escalates. She snatched the map, glanced at it, and shoved it back. You're wrong, she hissed, and I'll prove it. Before I could respond, she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. I need the sheriff, she said loudly, eyeing me. There's a trespasser harassing me. I sighed, sipping my coffee, and waited. This was classic Karen, escalate first, think never. Deputy Rogers arrived 20 minutes later, his patrol car kicking up dust on the gravel road. He was mid-40s, with a calm demeanor and a mustache that screamed small-town law. Karen launched into her spiel, arms flailing, claiming I threatened her over HOA-approved improvements. I handed Rogers the deed and survey, staying silent. He skimmed the documents, walked to the fence, and squinted at the posts. The creek burbled in the background, oblivious to the drama. Ma'am, Rogers said, turning to Karen, this fence is on his property. The easement's clear, shared access, no obstructions. You'll need to remove it. Karen's face reddened, her voice climbing. This is outrageous. The HOA approved that fence. Rogers raised an eyebrow. HOA doesn't override property law. I suggest you take this up with a lawyer, not 911. He tipped his hat. Have a pleasant day. I thanked Rogers as he drove off, feeling a flicker of triumph. Karen stood by her mailbox, fists clenched, her glare boring into me. This isn't over, she spat, storming inside. I walked home, Pixel trotting beside me, and checked the fence posts again. They hadn't moved, but something had shifted. Karen wasn't just annoyed, she was obsessed. I'd won this round, but the look in her eyes said she'd come back swinging. That night I sat on my porch, the creek's soft ripple mixing with cricket song. Pixel curled up at my feet and I sipped a beer, replaying Karen's words. The fence was just the start. I didn't know how far she'd go, but I knew one thing, I wasn't backing down. My land, my creek, my peace, they were worth fighting for, and if Karen wanted a war, I'd be ready. 2 weeks after Deputy Rogers shut down Karen's fence scheme, I came home to a war zone. My cedar fence was slashed in 3 places, wires dangling like broken bones. Deep tire marks gouged the creek bank, mud churned into a mess. Worst of all, one of my beehives lay in ruins, frames splintered, honey oozing into the grass, and angry bees buzzing in confusion. I clenched my fists, heart pounding, but the real gut punch came when Pixel, my loyal lab, yelped in pain. He'd stepped on a nailboard half buried near the fence line, its rusty spikes glinting with malice. Blood seeped from his paw as he limped to me, tail low. I rushed Pixel to the vet, who cleaned the wound, prescribed antibiotics, and charged me $200. Keep an eye for infection, she said. Driving home, Pixel whimpering in the backseat, I felt rage bubble up. Karen's petty fence dispute had turned personal. She crossed a line and I was done playing nice. That night I ordered 4 motion sensor cameras online, the kind that ping your phone with alerts every 10 seconds until you mute them. They had night vision, 1080p resolution, and cloud storage, overkill for deer, perfect for vandals. I also called Nora Beltran, a licensed surveyor with a reputation for precision and zero patience for nonsense. She arrived the next day, her pickup loaded with fluorescent orange stakes and laminated placards. Tampering with survey monuments is a crime, she said, hammering a stake into the ground. Let's see them try. Her placards, bolted to each stake, cited state law and penalties in bold red font. By noon, my property line was a glowing legal fortress. I mounted the cameras that evening, 1 on the barn, 2 along the creek, and 1 by the ruined beehive. Their red LEDs blinked like sentinels. I barely slept, half expecting another attack. At 1:13 a.m., my phone erupted with alerts. The live feed showed two figures in hoodies creeping along the creek. One yanked Nora's stakes with gloved hands, the other swung bolt cutters, slicing through a placard's bolt. The moonlight caught the cutter's face. Chandler, a local troublemaker Deputy Rogers had dealt with before, all sneers and bad tattoos. The second figure, shorter, with platinum blonde hair spilling from her hood, was unmistakable. Karen Davis, HOA tyrant, caught red-handed. I called Rogers at dawn, emailing him the footage. He watched the clip in my kitchen, coffee in hand, and nodded. That's Chandler all right, and Ms. Davis is having a bad night. By 6 a.m., he had a warrant for criminal mischief and trespassing. I rode along to Chandler's rundown trailer, staying in my truck as Rogers knocked. Chandler answered in pajama pants, hair a mess, claiming he'd been asleep all night. Rogers held up a still from my camera, Chandler mid-grimace, bolt cutters gleaming. Chandler's jaw dropped and he shut up fast. Karen's arrest was less dramatic, but just as sweet. Rogers and two deputies searched her garage, finding Nora's stolen stakes, the shredded placards, and a half-empty can of spray paint, neon green, the same shade defacing my no trespassing signs. Karen stood in her driveway, arms crossed, insisting Chandler had stored tools without her knowledge. Rogers wasn't fooled. "Ma'am, your hair's on camera," he said, cuffing her. The neighbors peeked from their windows, curtains twitching, as Karen was led to the patrol car. By noon, Karen made bond, her lawyer already spinning excuses. Chandler wasn't so lucky. Turns out he was on probation for a 2021 check kiting scheme, and this stunt violated his terms. The judge slapped him with a no-bond hold, and he stayed in county jail stewing. I drove home, Pixel's paw bandaged but wagging, and checked the cameras. The creek sparkled, the remaining stakes glowed, and for the first time in days I exhaled. Karen and Chandler thought they could bully me off my land, but they'd underestimated me and my tech. This wasn't over, but I had the upper hand, and I wasn't letting go. With Chandler locked up and Karen out on bond, I thought the worst was over. My creek was clear, Pixel's paw was healing, and my cameras stood guard. But my lawyer Elliot, a wiry man with a knack for sniffing out lies, wasn't ready to call it quits. "That gate Karen installed," he said, tapping his pen. "Someone paid for it. Let's follow the money." He subpoenaed the HOA's financial records, expecting a quick answer. What we found was a bombshell that shook the neighborhood. The gate, a $3,500 chain-link monstrosity, was funded by a cashier's check from the HOA's reserve account, signed by none other than Chandler, the hoodie-wearing vandal now cooling his heels in county jail. Elliot's eyes gleamed. "This isn't just vandalism," he said. "This smells like fraud." He dug deeper, pulling bank statements, ledgers, and meeting minutes. The deeper he went, the uglier it got. Chandler, the HOA's bookkeeper, had siphoned $46,900 over 2 years for grounds improvements that never happened. Phantom landscaping contracts, non-existent tree trimmings, and a mythical community fountain had drained the reserve fund dry. The gate was just the latest scam. The kicker, nearly $12,000 of the stolen funds had landed in Karen's personal bank account, labeled as consulting fees. Karen, who'd never consulted on anything but her own ego, was neck-deep in the scheme. Elliot printed the bank records, circling the transfers in red ink. "She's not just a bully," he said. "She's a thief." I took the evidence to the HOA board, a group of retirees and working parents who trusted Chandler's bookkeeping. We met in the community center, a stuffy room smelling of burnt coffee. I laid out the records, watching their faces shift from confusion to horror. Mrs. Larson, who'd battled Karen over her rosebushes, gasped. $46,000 for what? The board president, a quiet accountant named Tom, turned pale. "We've been robbed blind." They voted unanimously to press charges against Chandler and demanded an audit of every penny he'd touched. The county's white-collar crime unit took over, led by Detective Miriam Page, a sharp investigator with a voice like gravel. She raided Chandler's trailer, seizing his dusty desktop computer and a stack of thumb drives. Within days, she had a goldmine, forged receipts for fake vendors, doctored meeting minutes claiming the board approved the gate, and a word template for neon green approval stamps used to legitimize the fraud. One email from Chandler to Karen read, "Gates covered. Send your cut by Friday." Page pinned it to her evidence board like a trophy. Karen lawyered up fast, hearing James Hall, a $600 an hour defense attorney who wore suits sharper than his ethics. Hall stonewalled Page's questions, claiming Karen was unaware of any financial irregularities. "My client is a victim of Chandler's deception," he said, his voice dripping with rehearsal. The neighbors weren't buying it. At the community center, whispers turned to outrage. "Karen's been fleecing us for years," Tom muttered, crumpling a forged receipt. Chandler, meanwhile, was sweating, facing new felony charges, grand theft, forgery, and conspiracy, plus a probation revocation from his 2021 check kiting scam. He was staring at years behind bars. Page visited him in jail, offering a deal: testify against Karen and the DA might shave time off his sentence. Chandler, unshaven and twitchy in his orange jumpsuit, didn't need much convincing. "She planned it all," he told Page, his voice cracking. The gate, the land grabs the money. She promised me a cut of the creek property once the HOA annexed it. He signed the plea agreement, his handwriting shaky but legible. I sat on my porch that night, Pixel snoring beside me, the creeks ripple a faint lullaby. The HOA was in chaos, but justice was closing in. Corinne's smug grin, the one she'd flashed when she called the sheriff, was fatting. Chandler's betrayal had cracked her armor, and Paige's evidence was a sledgehammer. My land was safe for now, but this fight was bigger than my fence or my beehives. It was about exposing a pair of crooks who thought they could bully and steal their way to power. I sipped my beer, watching the stars, and felt the tide turning. The county courthouse smelled of polished wood and nervous sweat, its pews packed with neighbors who'd whispered about Corinne Davis for years. The trial of Corinne and Chandler, charged with felony conspiracy, theft, criminal mischief, and misdemeanor trespassing, was the talk of Willow Creek. I sat in the front row, Pixel's bandaged paw faint memory, my lawyer Elliot beside me, his tie slightly crooked from packing. Corinne, in a navy blazer, sat ramrod straight, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. Chandler, slouched next to her, looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, his orange jumpsuit swapped for a cheap suit that hung off his frame. The air crackled with anticipation. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Lena Torres, opened with a timeline. Corinne's illegal fence, the vandalism, the stolen HOA funds. She painted Corinne as the puppeteer, Chandler her reluctant pawn. Corinne's attorney, James Hall, countered with a smooth deflection, claiming Corinne was manipulated by Chandler's criminal expertise. The gallery snorted. Corinne manipulated. The woman who'd find kids for lemonade stands didn't take orders. The trial's turning point came on day 2 when Chandler took the stand. Facing 4 new felonies and an 18-month probation revocation for his 2021 check-kiting scam, he cut a deal with the DA, testified truthfully, and they'd recommend parole eligibility after 2 years. Chandler's hands shook as he swore the oath, his eyes darting to Corinne. She stared ahead, her jaw a steel trap. Corinne planned everything, he said, voice low but clear. The fence, the gate, the stakes. She wanted to annex his creek land for the HOA, then sell it for profit. She promised me a cut if I did the dirty work. Torres leaned in. What dirty work, Mr. Chandler? He swallowed hard, cutting his fence, smashing the beehive, stealing the survey stakes. She drove the SUV, picked the nights, even bought the bolt cutters. The gallery murmured. Mrs. Larson clutched her purse. Chandler continued, detailing how Corinne funneled $12,000 of HOA funds to herself as consulting fees, using his bookkeeping access to cover it. She said no one would check, he muttered. Hall objected, calling it hearsay, but the judge overruled. Corinne's composure cracked, her fingers twisting a tissue to shreds. Torres saved the knockout for last, my Ring camera footage. The courtroom's projector hummed to life, casting a grainy image on the screen. There at 12:47 a.m. was Corinne, blonde hair spilling from her hoodie, loading rebar into her SUV. Chandler, bolt cutters in hand, yanked a fluorescent stake from the creek bank. The timestamp matched the night Nora's survey markers vanished. A second clip showed them defacing my no trespassing signs with neon green spray paint, Corinne's laugh audible through the camera's mic. The jury leaned forward, faces grim. Hall tried to dismiss it as circumstantial, but the damage was done. Corinne's neighbors, once cowed by her HOA reign, now glared from the pews. Torres closed with the financial records, $46,900 drained from the HOA, $12,000 to Corinne, all traced by Detective Paige's audit. The jury deliberated for 2 hours, a formality. The foreman, a retired teacher, read the verdict, guilty on all counts for both. The gallery exhaled, a ripple of relief. Corinne's head bowed, her bun unraveling. Chandler just stared at the floor, resigned. Sentencing was swift. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with wire-rimmed glasses, addressed Chandler first. His probation violation triggered an automatic 18-month sentence, plus 4 years for the new charges, with parole possible in 2 if he behaved. You made poor choices, she said, but your cooperation helped. Chandler nodded, almost relieved, as deputies led him away. Corinne's turn was less forgiving. The judge cited her calculated deceit and abuse of authority. 18 months in prison, $32,000 restitution to me for damages, $46,900 to the HOA, and a 5-year no-contact order post-release. You betrayed your community, the judge said, her voice cutting. Corinne's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Hall requested bail pending appeal. The judge denied it, revoking her bond. Deputies cuffed her, the clink of metal echoing. The gallery buzzed. Corinne Davis, HOA tyrant, was going to jail. As she was let out, Corinne's eyes met mine. For a moment, I saw the woman who'd called the sheriff, smirking, certain she'd win. Now her face was pale, her blazer wrinkled. I raised my hand and gave a slow, polite wave, not out of malice, but because it felt right. This wasn't just about my fence or my beehives. It was about reclaiming my peace, my land, my life. Her gaze dropped, and she shuffled through the door, gone. I walked outside, the courthouse steps cool under October sun. Elliot clapped my shoulder. You did good, kid. I nodded, thinking of Pixel chasing fireflies, the creek sparkling free of gates. The fight had been brutal, but the verdict was a weight lifted. Karen and Chandler were done, their schemes exposed, their power stripped. I drove home, the radio off, letting the silence sink in. The war was over, and I'd won, not just for me, but for every neighbor Karen had bullied. The creek was mine again, and so was the future. The dust of the courtroom settled, but Willow Creek was still reeling from Karen and Chandler's crimes. The HOA, once Karen's personal fiefdom, was in shambles, bank accounts drained, trust shattered. A new board emerged, led by Tom, the quiet accountant who'd gasped at Chandler's $46,900 theft. They called an emergency meeting at the community center, the same room where I'd exposed the fraud. The air smelled of fresh paint, a sign of change. Tom stood at the podium, his voice steady but heavy. "We failed you," he said, eyes scanning the crowd, "but we're fixing it." To me, they offered a formal apology, handwritten on HOA letterhead, and a $4,500 check from Chandler's frozen bank account to repair my shattered beehives. Mrs. Larson, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand. "About time," she whispered. I cashed the check and got to work. The disputed land, once scarred by Karen's gate and Chandler's tire marks, was now mine, free and clear. I hired a local contractor, a gruff man named Hal, to build a greenhouse where the gate had stood. By spring, its glass walls gleamed in the sun, the air inside thick with the scent of tomato starts and basil. My bees, relocated to new hives, buzzed happily, their hum a quiet anthem of resilience. Pixel, his paw fully healed, bounded through the wildflowers, chasing butterflies along the creek. The easement sparkled, unobstructed, its ripples catching the light like a promise kept. Every nail I hammered, every seed I planted, felt like a middle finger to Karen's schemes. Peace, it turns out, is fragile. In June, a letter arrived from Elaine Castor, a name I didn't know. She claimed to be Karen's cousin and heir, demanding a private right-of-way across my land to access the creek. Attached was a deed supposedly signed by Karen before her arrest, granting Elaine passage. The paper looked legit, stamped, notarized, official. My stomach churned. Was this Karen's final jab from behind bars? I called Elliot, who chuckled over the phone. "Forged deeds are her style," he said. "Let's bury it." Elliot met me at the surveyor's office, where Nora Beltran, my stake-driving ally, pulled the original easement records. The deed Elaine presented had inconsistencies, a wrong parcel number, a notary seal from a non-existent office. Elliot subpoenaed Karen's prison correspondence, finding a letter to Elaine with instructions. File the claim, push for a settlement. Nora's 2019 survey, laminated and pristine, proved my boundary was untouchable. Elliot drafted a cease and desist letter, and Elaine, faced with fraud charges, withdrew her claim before the court date. "She folded faster than a lawn chair," Elliot said, grinning. I exhaled, the creek's burble outside my window a reminder of what I'd fought for. Restitution came in fits and starts. The state's crime victim fund sent checks, garnished from Karen's prison wages, $58 a month, a drop in the $78,900 she owed. It would take decades to clear, but the symbolism mattered. Each deposit was a tiny victory, proof she couldn't escape consequences. Chandler's fate was quieter but stranger. In August, a letter arrived from the county jail, his handwriting jagged but neat. He'd earned a paralegal certificate, he wrote, and was sorry for the mess. Enclosed was a hand-drawn map of my property, suggesting spots for an orchard, apple trees by the creek, pears near the barn. Not expecting forgiveness, he scrawled, "But I owe you." I stared at the map, torn. Chandler had wrecked my fence, hurt Pixel, stolen from us all. Yet this gesture, clumsy as it was, felt human. I wrote back, brief but honest. "Sunflowers are taller than ever. Keep studying." No promises, but a door cracked open. I walked the land that evening, Pixel trotting beside me, the greenhouse glowing under a pink sunset. The bees danced in their hives, and the creek flowed free, no gates, no stakes, no Karen. The HOA was rebuilding, new bylaws, transparent budgets, even a community garden plan on unused common land. Mrs. Larson had started a petition to plant her rosebushes there, and Tom promised to approve it. The neighborhood felt lighter, as if Karen's shadow had finally lifted. Sitting on my porch, a beer in hand, I thought about the fight. It wasn't just about my 5 acres or Pixel's paw. It was about a community bullet into silence, now finding its voice. Karen's prison cell, Chandler's plea, Elaine's failed scam, they were proof we'd won. The greenhouse stood as my monument, its glass catching the last rays of dusk. I scratched Pixel's ears, his tail thumping the floorboards. "We did all right, buddy," I said. The creek sang back, and for the first time in years, I slept without checking the cameras. Karen's fall left a void in Willow Creek, but voids have a way of filling with something better. Her McMansion, with its sterile lawn and HOA rulebook, went up for sale while she sat in prison. By spring, Sprout Tomorrow, an organic farming nonprofit with a knack for turning blight into bounty, bought the property for a steal. Their plan: transform Karen's half-acre into a community garden, a place for neighbors to grow food and mend what she'd broken. They reached out to me, knowing my beehives and wildflower patches drew pollinators like moths to a flame. "Help us plant for bees," their director, Maya, said, her voice warm over the phone. "Let's make this land sing." The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen's fortress of control was about to become a shared Eden. I met Maya at the property in April, the air crisp with promise. Karen's lawn, once mowed to military precision, was already tilled into rich, dark soil. Maya handed me a clipboard of native pollinator plants, milkweed, bee balm, coneflowers. "Your bees will love this," she said, grinning. I sketched planting zones, picturing butterflies dancing where Karen's gate once stood. The creek just beyond my boundary sparkled in approval. Pixel, tail wagging, sniffed the soil as if claiming it for us both. The first volunteer day was a revelation. I arrived with my brush cutter, expecting a small crew. Instead, dozens showed up, Mrs. Larson with her gardening gloves, Tom from the new HOA board hauling compost, even Deputy Rogers off-duty in jeans and a flannel wielding a shovel. New HOA members, free of Corinne's shadow, rolled wheelbarrows alongside kids who'd once feared her clipboard. We dug raised beds, planted tomato vines, and sowed pollinator strips, the air thick with laughter and earth. Rogers paused, wiping sweat from his brow. "Never thought I'd be gardening on her turf," he said, chuckling. I loaned my cutter to clear weeds, and by dusk, Corinne's lawn was gone, replaced by rows of hope. Sprout Tomorrow worked fast. By October, the garden was a riot of color. Zucchini swelling, sunflowers nodding, bees humming from my hives to the new blooms. They hosted a harvest dinner under a white tent, fairy lights strung across the former driveway. Tables groaned with dishes sourced from the garden. Roasted butternut squash, honey-glazed carrots drizzled with my bees' work, heirloom tomato bruschetta bursting with flavor. Neighbors filled the seats, their chatter drowning out memories of HOA meetings. Maya raised a glass, her braids catching the light. "To our garden," she said, "and to our friend who fought for what's right." Eyes turned to me and I shrugged, cheeks warm. "I just wanted my creek back," I said, earning laughs. The real victory was this, nourishment where Corinne had sown hostility. I'd been busy too. Using the $4,500 from Chandler's account, I'd rebuilt my beehives, but the disputed land needed more. I'd salvaged wood from Corinne's illegal gate and her old shed, which Sprout Tomorrow let me haul away. With Hal, my contractor, I designed a barn, nothing fancy, just a sturdy frame for tools and dreams. We got the permits, every box checked, no HOA nonsense. By September, it stood proud near the greenhouse, its reclaimed beams weathered but strong. Each plank, once part of Corinne's schemes, now held up my future. I hung a lantern inside, its glow warm against the dusk, and scratched Pixel's ears as he sniffed the fresh sawdust. The barn was my closure, but the garden was the community. Mrs. Larson's rosebushes, once banned, now bloomed by the garden's gate. Tom's HOA had new rules: transparency, no fines for chalk drawings. Kids ran through the beds unafraid, their giggles a rebuke to Corinne's reign. Rogers stopped by one evening off duty to drop off a tomato seedling. "For your greenhouse," he said. I nodded, thinking of the creek, the bees, the peace we'd all reclaimed. That night I sat on my porch, Pixel curled at my feet, the garden's fairy lights twinkling across the boundary. The creek sang its endless song, and the barn's silhouette loomed against the stars. Corinne was a memory, her prison wages trickling in, her power buried under soil and roots. Chandler's letter with its orchard map sat on my desk, a reminder that even broken things could try to mend. I sipped a beer, the air cool with autumn's edge, and felt the weight of the fight lift. This land, this community, was ours again, not just mine, but everyone's. We turned conflict into something green, something alive. Pixel sighed, content, and I knew we'd earned every inch of this piece.